like one of the most limiting beliefs we hold in this industry is that we have more limiting beliefs to excavate.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is a belief. And really, even bigger picture, all beliefs are limiting in some capacity. If we want to just use the word limiting, all beliefs limit something. The belief I am a millionaire limits me from only making six figures. It also limits me from making $10 million, right? So it's like every belief has that duality of both sides of like what it's going to offer you and then what it's going to not offer you. So I think there's an interesting sort of unpacking that we can explore within that, just in our own psyche. And then you mentioned too, like all of our beliefs are here for protection. And that's, I think, a beautiful way of looking at it. Like everything that's coming up for us is here because it supported us at one point in our lives. And it's simply about saying, does this still serve me? Does this still support me? And if not, then am I ready to let this go? Is it all right with my unconscious mind for me to let this belief go and for me to choose a new story and to begin to rewrite that?
Hey, Jen, I'm so excited to have you here. We were just like chit-chatting that I was on your podcast and now you're here on our podcast. And I'm so grateful and so excited to have you here. I will like let you introduce yourself here in a moment. But I know when I met you, we had a little one-on-one session and I had kind of like a free fall, like imposter syndrome thing right afterwards. And you were just so good in helping me kind of keep the lane, focus on what I'm doing. And so I just want to say one, thank you so much because it was so helpful, but also so excited to have you here and be able to dive in with you on the podcast.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for having me. I am obsessed with the episode that we recorded and just getting to spend time with you. Like, I feel like we just vibe and get into such deep, beautiful conversations. So I'm super stoked to be here.
I know. I think it's one of those things that like when you find somebody that kind of is going against the grain, like I was thinking about this the other day, I saw a post and I was like, gosh, I resonate with this so much. And yet it goes against the grain so much. And I think sometimes when you find those people that are saying the things that you want to say, but maybe you didn't have the words to say it, or you didn't know that that's exactly what you were feeling, but then somebody else says it or puts it out there and you're like, yes, this is how I'm feeling. Like, I think that's kind of how I felt with you, is that feeling of like, there is some safety in these feelings that I'm having that feel incongruent with what everybody else is saying, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel that so deeply in my heart. I'm like touching my heart. I'm like, oh.
Feel it. So, well, tell us a little bit about you. Like, tell us about your business story, like how you got here. Like, what has your journey been like?
Yeah. So I today am known as a like brain-based business coach and energy healer and subconscious mind coach. I run a coaching certification where I train coaches on how to use subconscious modalities. And that was all over a decade evolution of, you know, starting in network marketing way back in the day for my first business and doing health and fitness coaching. And then realizing, wait, I'm so much more passionate about business. And then transitioning into teaching health coaches how to grow their business after I had found success. And then from there, realizing like there's this huge gap in the course creation world. There's, you know, I got to a point after I had you know, the quote unquote success that everyone's seeking, like had the 6-figure launch in 2016 and had hundreds of clients coming into these programs. And I had quote unquote arrived. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, there's something going on here. Because I was seeing it in my group, I was seeing it in other groups, that there was just like this pattern within the dynamics where something was going on. Primarily, there was these like avatars people were stepping into. There was like the person who was the implementer, there was the underdog, the cheerleader, the ghost, like the lurker, like all these different identities within group community. And I started to get really curious about specifically the underdog and what's going on there. Why are they self-sabotaging? What's preventing them? Because everyone else in the group could see this limitless potential that they had. And that really got me curious. And I ended up saying, okay, even though we're serving up business strategy on a silver platter, why are only a small percentage of the people able to get the, you know, quote unquote, impossible results, like those, the ones that the testimonials, everyone's like, they made $1 million in 20 days, you know, like, why are we all so obsessed with those results? Why are those the ones that are being celebrated primarily? And what's preventing the other like 98% of people, not specifically in the group I was running, we had a very tight knit group. It was very high touch. So we had a much higher like completion rate and success rate. But, some of these larger courses, especially back at that time, was sort of an attitude of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah.
And there was not a lot of responsibility at that time being taken around what's going on in your course that people aren't getting results. Like, how are you showing up as the coach? How are you teaching? How are you trading? So I got really obsessed with this question around, why is there such a diversity of results? And how can we show up in a new way? What's missing? And that was really what brought me into the subconscious and understanding coaching at a much deeper level. And really, I became very obsessed with infusing all of these principles into not just how I coach, but also into my courses and programs, and really like refining the process of like designing curriculum to make sure that as many different learning styles were able to be supported and able to understand and comprehend and take action. So that kind of led me into the subconscious, and then launching certification was just sort of a natural evolution of that.
Yeah. Well, I think so in that, I know one of the things I remember about you too was like that learning style differences and like just recognizing that every person learns in different ways. And I think that there's so much of like, oftentimes we see in the coaching space and in the digital marketing space is like somebody puts something out there based on what feels good and right for them. And it's kind of like a take it or leave it if it doesn't work for you. Yep. And I know that that's something I've been wrestling with, is like watching what is it that gets my clients the biggest results? Like, where is it that they see the biggest transformation? And I will just say, like, one of the beliefs I've been wrestling with is that it's a matter of me. Like, they have to have contact with me. Like, I'm the person. And so I've been wrestling with that. Like, how can I create that same result and same transformation without me having to have so much of myself invested in it, and that it's all of my time, right? And kind of separating that out, which I think is kind of a lot of like what you're talking about too, is like understanding what creates that transformation and what creates the result for people. Something recently, I was talking with somebody, I was like, I had this realization that like, I'm not a teacher. So like, I don't love just being on camera and teaching direct content and direct stuff. I very much more love the facilitation of transformation. So whether that be like at the retreats or in a coaching call, like I feel like I do so much better responding and meeting people exactly where they're at, which is probably partly why I have this belief that like I have to be involved, is because I feel like I'm not the teacher. Like I'm not the person putting up that content that's just like, here, let me teach you and you're going to have the same result. But I think it does go into, like you said, the responsibility both as the coach and as the recipient on the other end as to whether that gets the results. So what do you feel like are the biggest mistakes that I will say like coaches are making that they could change what they're doing and the practices that they're doing to help get their clients get bigger results?
I think one of the biggest things for coaches, specifically in this context we're talking about, of like being able to maybe free up more of your time and have like a DIY course, or maybe have a program that you're able to scale a little bit more. I'll just share kind of the mistake that I made or what I learned. So I had a course that had done very well. We had all these people going through it. People were getting results. It's like a business and marketing program for health coaches. And then I decided that I should make it more accessible, make it more affordable, scale it. And I removed most of the group coaching. I was like, we kind of got the curriculum down. This is what we're teaching. And all of a sudden, I started to notice weird things happening within the Facebook group. Questions that were never asked before in the Facebook group were popping up, and I was playing freaking whack-a-mole with these questions. Oh my God, these people are like in panic and freaking out. And like all this weird energy was starting to come into the space, and it just felt so wonky. I started to realize, oh crap, all of these little gaps were being filled by the group coaching. It wasn't actually in the program. So I spent 8 months rebuilding that program from scratch. Yeah. And actually sitting with the curriculum, looking at the trends of what were the biggest questions that were coming up. And for one example, I was talking about niching down. So there's a lot of big mistakes that people make when they're niching down. And so I was like, okay, let's look at those things, but let's also look at the subconscious beliefs people have about niching down, for example. So the people say, if I niche down, I'm going to be talking to a smaller audience. I'm going to leave people out. So I actually started building all of those reframes and shifting those beliefs before I even taught the content. So it was clearing all of those disempowering beliefs, all of those things, not just about the method or me, but also about them, so that they weren't capable of speaking. So it was kind of knocking them out in a very specific order. And then also at the end, when I would teach something like niche, literally without fail, somebody would go, what if I have 2 niches? Without fail. What if I'm not a mom, but I work with mostly moms? Can it still be moms? So it was like, I just kept getting the same questions. So one of my strengths as a teacher and coach is I notice patterns very quickly and I'm able to adapt. So I started seeing all of these patterns and I ended up incorporating all of those like what if questions into the end of the program, like into the end of that module. And literally it was like overnight, all of those big questions, all of those big scared emotions, all those fears were completely shifted. And I was like, oh, this really works. So I was incorporating everything that I was learning about the subconscious and how to shift beliefs, how to speak to those deeper elements, like instead of just talking about the how to. Because I realized too, I'm a how learner. If I have an idea of something that I want to do, just tell me how to do it. I'm like, I don't need convincing. If I've already decided I'm going to do it, just show me the steps. Let's get into it. And I will dive into the details. I'm very detail oriented, which is a great thing if you are going to get stuff done. Not a great thing as an entrepreneur when you're trying to be like the visionary CEO, big picture. I'm like, oh, I got to fight to get out of the details sometimes. And so for me, it was about recognizing that I wasn't actually explaining why niching down was important. I wasn't totally fully defining what is niching. I wasn't explaining how this was going to help them grow their business. They had no buy-in. I was doing all of that on the live calls. And so once I redesigned the program, like I said, totally changed the questions that were asked. And it really empowered the students to ask new and different and really more empowering questions. So instead of being like, what should my Facebook group name be? Or what should my niche be? Or, you know, what should my podcast name be? They were like, hey, I came up with these 3 ideas. All of them feel really good. Which one do you think speaks most to this specific client that I'm trying to speak to? So it's like all of a sudden they were becoming these like master marketers and really understanding how to think about marketing and messaging and reaching their ideal client. So
that is so good because it comes up. I mean, whether it's on social media or it comes up in your programs or it comes up wherever, it's like we all are coming with these beliefs or these thoughts in the background. And it's like, you know, sometimes like even for me, like I get so close to my stuff that you don't see like other people's doubts or other people's beliefs. And it's in the coaching and in those conversations that we meet those places and we're able to help people move through them. So I love like you talking about that is like teaching and understanding all of those. Like, I think that's what makes a really great marketer too, is like the person that understands the beliefs that people are coming to it from and what those questions they have already. Like, that's what makes it so that people buy into our programs so much more and easier, is because we're addressing not just those like top surface level things, but like the deeper subconscious things. So how do you feel like for you in that process of like going through and kind of really identifying those questions and like how you help your clients now in your certification program, like do this, like the method and the madness, like, right? Like where do you start in terms of like going through and saying like, I really want to make sure I'm understanding these like subconscious beliefs and these subconscious things that people are coming at me. And like, here's the question that they're asking. But oftentimes that question that they're asking it's covering up all of those subconscious things that are underneath. So like, where do people go from there in terms of like really truly finding out, like, what is it that somebody coming and saying like, I don't know what my niche is. Like, I don't know, like it could be truly just like, I don't know what the niche is, but it could be, I don't believe in myself. Like, I don't believe that the niche is big enough. I don't know that like I have what it's to offer. Like, there's so many different ways and avenues to go off of that. So like, where do you go digging into that to really kind of make sure that you're creating your content and creating your program that's really supportive to everybody getting that transformation?
I love this. So what you're really saying is like, you're identifying there's like a question beneath the question. There might be like a surface level strategy question or learning question, but oftentimes there's some emotions or limiting beliefs or decisions underneath. Yeah. I really love Robert Dilts. He talks about and breaks down that there's like 3 main categories of limiting beliefs. There's helplessness, hopelessness, and worthlessness. So once I started to like understand these 3 components around like people saying, well, like, I'm not worthy, I'm not capable, it's not possible. Those are 3 of the big ones. However, I will say too, in a lot of containers where, I will say mainly there's maybe a head coach and it's a bigger group and they're hiring and training outside coaches. A lot of people for a couple of years were really into using what are called sleight of mouth patterns, which are actually from Robert Dilts and the field of neurolinguistic programming. And I love a good sleight of mouth pattern, baby. Like, bring them on. Like, those are like my favorite things ever. It's basically just a like really advanced reframe that you don't know you're being reframed, or the intention is for it to not be obvious. And what Robert Dilts talks about too is that sometimes people were overly reframing things. So someone would come into a group and say, how many leads should I have for this webinar? And be like, what's your belief about that? And they're like, yeah, I don't have a belief about that. I just don't have the information. So many times there are limiting beliefs underneath a question. And I think it's important as coaches to recognize that sometimes it's also just an unanswered how question. Mm-hmm. Because when we have an unanswered how question and we don't understand how something's going to work, there's a lot of unknown. There's fear, there's uncertainty, and then our brains don't like fear, unknown, uncertainty, blank space. So it tends to fill in the gaps with some kind of narrative. Yeah. And if we've been subconsciously programmed to fear the unknown, then we're probably going to create a fear-based narrative about not having the answer to this question. But really, it's like that person, if they just, oh, you need 50 people on your webinar to get to this goal that we have. Oh, okay, great. I already have 70. So I don't need to freak out and think it's not enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not capable of doing this. It's not going to be successful. I'm not going to make the money I want. I already have more than enough people. Cool. Mm-hmm. Literally just like that, any potential manifestation of a limiting belief is gone. And I think sometimes people don't recognize that knowledge, that information, that understanding of whatever that area of mastery is. Just having that foundational piece can sometimes eliminate it without any other real effort, right? And then of course, there might be other limiting beliefs underneath that, but sometimes it really can just be that simple. So as coaches, it's always about like, okay, there's questions beneath the questions. So I just always say, ask open-ended questions that are not projecting your own thing. So a leading question, for example, would be like, does that make you scared? Does that make you sad? Well, now you're projecting the emotion that you think they're feeling, as opposed to when you think about that, what comes up for you? What's present for you? What do you notice? Right. So I really teach and train to ask very open-ended questions to be in that discovery.
So good. Yeah. And I think it's so funny. Like there's a coaching program that I'm in and some of us joke around that there's never an answer to a how question. It's always like, well, what comes up for you? Like what? And it's like, how do I click or how do I connect my Zoom to Facebook? And it's like, well, if you had the answer to that, what do you think you would do? And it's like, I don't have the answer. That's why I'm asking. And so that question, when you said like, there's some people like project that there's this belief there, like sometimes they are straight up just like, I just need the how to. And sometimes there is that deeper belief and different thing there. So it actually probably is very similar to I did my one-to-one with you, where I was in a breathwork session and the facilitator said, instead of trying to remove and release and like let go of our limiting beliefs, can we just allow them to be here? And honor them and see them and acknowledge them for what they are and how they've served us and what they've done for us. And it was such a shift for me. I think it actually, for so long of my coaching journey has been about like discover what's the thing that is underneath that's blocking me from actually hitting my goals. Like I'm not hitting the goals that I have. So there must be something wrong with me. Like there's some sort of belief, there's some sort of fear, there's some sort of doubt, like there's something there that's keeping me from hitting those goals. And so I like went on this excavation journey of like trying to figure it out, looking to all these other people, like looking for support, doing all these healing things, doing all this digging. And it was in that session when she said that, like, can you let it be here? That like my perspective on limiting beliefs changed and shifted so much in that sense of we are always going to have limiting beliefs. There's always going to be some sort of fear. There's always going to be something there. Like we could go on this never ending excavation service or like discovery thinking that we're never quite there. We're never quite good enough because we're never going to reach the end where we're like no longer have any fears or no longer have any limiting beliefs or no longer have like any doubts or like anything in our life. That for me, I was putting myself on this journey to never be good enough, like always be searching for that limiting belief. And so for me, like that was such a pivotal moment of now it's like, okay, I can illuminate limiting beliefs and honor them, like see them, like discover like, ooh, that's why I'm acting that way. Okay, cool. What is that here to help me learn? Or like, what's that here for? But not necessarily feeling like there's something blocking me that I have to go deeper and discover in order to be able to achieve my goals. Like, I don't know if that, like, if I worded that all quite right, but like for me, it changed my perspective on limiting beliefs, no longer having to be this thing that like I have to just dig through and find, but that when they come and I'm open to learning about them, like I can accept them and like understand that they were here to help protect me or to serve me in some way, that there's not something wrong with me that's limiting. Does that make sense?
1,000%. You just spoke to that so beautifully. And I think everything you just articulated is so much of the personal development industry gone to like the extreme end of the spectrum, where people often become so fixated on finding the limiting belief that becomes their only focus.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember even learning about manifestation in the early days, and it was like, oh my God, I had a negative thought. Oh my God, I'm in a downward spiral. Oh my God, what's happening? And like, then you just spiral more. And with the whole and I think what you offered of that coach that supported you was so beautiful, just letting it be here. Because we project so much judgment on these quote unquote limiting beliefs because we're told we have to get rid of them in order to be successful. So then it becomes this whole game of resistance of having to fight it. And even working with clients are like, I'm angry that I have this. Start speaking to a part of themselves. We do any parts work. And they're like, I'm mad at that part, or I don't want that. And it's like this rejection and this resistance that actually creates more rejection and resistance and judgment and shame that spiral downward. And with the limiting belief thing, something that I had that kind of came to me a couple of years ago was like, one of the most limiting beliefs we hold in this industry is that we have more limiting beliefs to excavate.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is a belief. And really, even bigger picture, all beliefs are limiting in some capacity. If we want to just use the word limiting, all beliefs limit something. The belief I am a millionaire limits me from only making six figures. It also limits me from making $10 million, right? So it's like every belief has that duality of both sides of like what it's going to offer you and then what it's going to not offer you. So I think there's an interesting sort of unpacking that we can explore within that, just in our own psyche. And then you mentioned too, like all of our beliefs are here for protection. And that's, I think, a beautiful way of looking at it. Like everything that's coming up for us is here because it supported us at one point in our lives. And it's simply about saying, does this still serve me? Does this still support me? And if not, then am I ready to let this go? Is it all right with my unconscious mind for me to let this belief go and for me to choose a new story and to begin to rewrite that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so powerful. I think for me too, like looking at, like you talked about the parts work and stuff, is I now see like anytime one of those thoughts or fears or limiting beliefs or things like populate to the surface, it's like, oh, okay, I see you. I honor you. Like, I understand like why you're trying to do this, like why you're trying to keep me safe. I've got this other vision over here. I can see things differently. Like, it's okay. I've got you. And so for me, that was such a shift in that sense of, like you said, I don't have to excavate. I don't have to dig out these limiting beliefs. When they do come up, or when I do have that question of like, okay, why am I thinking that way? And when that fear or that limiting belief populates up there, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. But we can keep moving forward. Like we can keep going. We can create this bigger thing. It doesn't have to be. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, is like recognizing and honoring that like we can move forward and create what we want and do what we want, despite whatever limiting beliefs are there. Like they're there just helping us protect ourselves, and they can come along for the ride with the journey with us. We don't have to follow them. Like we don't have to go down like the spiral of where they're taking us, but they're likely going to continue along the journey with us. Like if we have the fear of I'm not good enough right now around something, like chances are it's going to come up again 10 years from now, but that doesn't mean that it has to stop us from actually taking the action forward or moving forward. It's when we get caught in that spiral of believing them. So like for me, that was such a breakthrough, I think, of just like being like, okay, I see you. I hear you. I understand you feel like we're not good enough. Here's why we're going to keep moving forward this way and going down this road. Come along for the journey with me if you want, but I don't have to believe you, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, like we don't have to believe everything that we think.
Yes.
Yeah. You were talking about how that coach was just like, yeah, let it be here. Just going back to like what we were saying about this idea of resistance. I teach a lot of stuff around hypnosis, and one of my favorite hypnotherapists whose work I teach from is Milton Erickson. And his whole concept was about this utilization method, where basically whatever the client would bring, he would never resist a client. So I was telling my certification group about this the other day, and they were hysterically laughing. I was like, there was one of the books, I think it was either My Voice Will Go With You or Uncommon Therapy, where they were talking about that he was working with this woman, and she came in and she didn't really take care of herself, wasn't really practicing regular hygiene. Her hair was all matted and greasy. And, this is probably like maybe the 1940s or 50s. So there's certain, obviously, paradigms within that world as well. Yeah. So she came in and she's like, well, I'm terribly ugly and I'm very plain and, no man would want me. And if you go to, a coach or therapist, they'll be like, well, what do you like about yourself? Or they'll try to reframe you. And he just went, yes, you're very ugly and you're very plain and no man will want you. So, and then led her in another direction, because his whole thing was like creating agreement. Because one, they're going to go, really? You agree with me? Nobody would actually say that to me. He's like, it was true. So she needed to like, why lie to her? Why try to reframe her? Like, yes, let's agree with that. And then now let's, bring into some kind of therapeutic conversational hypnosis metaphor through his work. The next session, this woman came in and she had bathed and her hair was done. And, she was taking pride in her appearance and ended up beginning to date and whatnot. But just like this idea of agreeing with someone, I think that's something that within the world of like reframing, we have kind of gotten away from this other way of approaching a problem that someone might have. And it kind of goes back to like reflecting and validating and just being like, yeah, it's understandable why you would feel that way when somebody says something, instead of trying to immediately get them to change their state and kind of sprinkle positivity on everything. Not everything needs to be changed. We just kind of sometimes need to be present with what is there. And so that's why Milton's kind of like the extreme version of, meeting somebody exactly where they are.
Yeah.
Reflecting exactly what they say, but it's interesting. Yeah.
It is interesting. And it's interesting that you bring this up too, because that was like an exact conversation I had last night. My almost 13-year-old came home from youth group and she walks in the door and I was like at my computer. She comes over and sits and plops in the chair. And she said, I can't remember how the conversation initially started, but she basically said that she hates being tall. She doesn't like being taller than everybody else. And that the whole way home from youth group, dad was trying to convince her why being tall was a good thing. And she was like frustrated in like the sense of like, I don't like being tall and dad's making me feel like it should be a good thing. And I just didn't like that. And I said that sounds like it really hurts and it was frustrating for you. She just completely diffused. She didn't need to talk. She didn't want to talk about it anymore after that. Like there was nothing else she needed, but you just watched like the whole angst that she had around like, this is what I'm feeling. And dad's telling me what I'm feeling is not right. Like you said, sprinkling positivity on it. Like, why is being tall a good thing? Which is when our heads, like we sometimes think about that, like reframe it. It is a good thing. And then yet all she wanted was to be validated that she was feeling like, I don't like being tall. And that frustration that she was having right there. And it was amazing to watch. Like she immediately shifted and was just like, okay, I'm good. I'm done. Like we're good. That's all it took. It was like me being like, that sounds like it was really frustrating and it made you upset. Or like, I can't remember exactly the words that were there, but like just me saying one sentence of, it sounds like this is what you're feeling was enough to like shift it all for her.
Yeah, it's powerful to just be heard, seen, witnessed, validated, and to know that whatever we're feeling can just be. And it doesn't need to be fixed. Because a lot of times we're not looking for things to be fixed.
Yes.
I know for myself, I don't know all that much about human design, but I'm a 3/5 projector. And according to what people tell me, like, don't give me advice. Like, it's just like, ask me questions and help me find my way to discovery. And so that's really how I try to show up for my clients, because that's this, and I attract a lot of clients who resonate with that. But I think that's such a powerful thing to receive myself when somebody's just able to hold that space and witness me in my process without judgment or being like, oh, you shouldn't feel mad about being short or tall or whatever. You should like it. And it's like, well, I don't want to. I don't like it. And like, that's okay.
Yeah. And I think just as women too, like, I feel like that comes up so much is like, I'm feeling XYZ, like I'm feeling mad, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling upset. And like you said, in the coaching space, in the personal development space, and like our world, it's like, how do we shift you from just in that state of feeling into the positive, like the manifestation, like the positivity, like all that. And I remember at one point way back in my early days, somebody calling me like toxic positivity, whatever. And I was like, I totally was repulsed to that. I'm like, I'm not toxic. I'm like, I'm not being overly positive. But now being in the space that I am and like the breath work and the journey that I've been on, it's like one is not better than the other. And like we can hold, like you said, the duality of these heavy emotions and these amazing things at the same time. And that the full human experience is experiencing all of it. And the contrast of all of it is what gives us the breadth of life. And that sometimes what we need is really just truly to sit in what we're feeling instead of feeling like we have to fix it or we have to change it or we have to reframe it or we have to, like, all these tools that we have, which can be really incredibly powerful and so needed in certain situations, but they're not always the right one at the time.
Amen.
Yeah.
I think too, there's a lot of urgency that gets created around like needing to fix it now.
Yeah.
Just go back to like what you were talking about before of like the stories that if I don't release this limiting belief, I'm not going to be successful. So somebody who's like desiring to have like financial abundance or clients or whatever it is, it puts a lot of pressure on a self-discovery journey, a healing journey, because it's like, well, I can't, then there's like this whole manifestation of I can't have what I want until this is fixed.
Yeah.
And then we almost come into our own self-discovery journey through a lens of brokenness. Of like, I am broken and I need to be fixed. When really it's like, are you broken or are you human? Are you having a human experience?
Yes. Yes. Same. I don't know a ton about human design. I know little bits and pieces, but I think I'm a 3-5 as well, but I'm a generator. So interesting that we're like the same numbers, but different there. But when I was looking up some of like the gene keys are related around it, like I don't know, like core life lesson, I guess is what it is like learning to just full acceptance. And it's interesting that like, this is the journey that I've been on, is like learning to just fully accept right here, right now, no matter what it looks like, no matter if it's to the end of my goals or it's like kind of allowing ourselves to be caught in the messy middle and being okay with that and not feeling like I have to get to where I want to go. Like, I know I want to go somewhere and I know where I want to go. But it's like, I'm okay being in the journey where I'm at right now and that acceptance of where it is right now. And I think part of it is like, I've learned, and this is part of my journey and how I'm showing up for myself, but also how I'm helping support other women too. And I think that that's such a powerful lesson. Like, it's such a powerful thing to be like, I can be broken. I could be not at my goals. I could be falling short of where I want to be. I cannot be there yet, whatever this there destination is, and still be completely okay and like happy with that. And I think that's the journey I've been on. And I think it's been an incredible, powerful journey.
I love that.
Yeah. So, well, Jen, this has been so amazing. And I've loved having you on here. It's been like an amazing conversation. I would love to be able to connect you with anybody that's listening. So where can people find you? Come follow you and learn more.
Yeah, you can find me everywhere at Hey Jen Casey. It's Jen with one N, primarily on Instagram. We're rebooting our YouTube soon, and then the CEO Psyche podcast. And you can go and listen to the amazing episode that we did.
Yes.
273. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, look at you. You had the number like in your head. Did you like, I mean, I know it's a recent episode, but I'm like, I always have to go look. I'm like, what episode number are we on? Like, where are we at?
We put it out this week, so it was top of mind, but yeah. 73.
So this has been so good and I've appreciated it. I have just loved, like I said, the relationship that I've been able to form with you and like connect with you. Like, you've been such a voice in my head as I've been going through this journey. Like, really, I think the last like year has been such a big journey for me in this place of self-acceptance and like just accepting part of my journey. And so I appreciate you being a part of that and in the midst. Is there anything that you feel like we missed or we left out that you want to leave people with?
This was just such a beautiful conversation, and I just really appreciate you and just even how this conversation flowed. It's just very organic, very conversational. And I would just say, if anybody has any questions, feel free to like reach out. But I mean, ultimately, I feel like we covered it. Yeah.
So good. So good. Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you.